Hello and welcome back to another deep dive. We're really shifting gears today.
We definitely are. It's a bit of a departure.
Yeah, usually we're looking at the cutting edge of consumer tech, or maybe the latest shifts in the global economy,
Mhm.
or some obscure historical event.
Right.
But today, we're going to look at something that is both incredibly modern and, well, completely ancient at the exact same time. And I should mention right up front, we are broadcasting this deep dive under the banner of the Funeral Channel Network.
Which is such a pleasure to be a part of. And honestly, this collaboration is really fascinating because it forces us to look at a sector of life and death that we usually try our absolute hardest to ignore.
Oh, completely.
Yeah.
Until we are absolutely forced to confront it.
Right, until you have no choice.
Exactly. Most of us, we walk past funeral homes on the street and we just look the other way. We don't want to think about it.
Yeah.
But today, we're walking right in the front door. We are unpacking a really compelling source text titled Digital Narratives: The Art of the Funeral Slideshow.
And if you are listening to this right now and thinking, okay, I'm skipping this one, I do not want to listen to an hour about sad PowerPoint presentations, we really need you to stay with us.
Let's do.
Because this isn't really about the software at all. It's not some, tutorial on how to use Keynote or how to add a feed transition in PowerPoint.
No, not at all.
What we are actually analyzing today is a massive fundamental cultural shift in how human beings process the end of a life.
The central question that the source text poses is actually kind of mind-blowing when you stop and just consider the timeline of human history. Because we spent thousands of years basically just carving names into cold, hard stone.
That was the gold standard for centuries. Granite, marble.
Right. Permanent, sure, but completely silent. And then, in the blink of an eye, historically speaking, we have transitioned to projecting these high-definition, musical, highly curated visual biographies in darkened rooms.
It's the shift from the static to the cinematic.
Yeah, the cinematic. Why has the slideshow, this very specific digital artifact, become the emotional centerpiece of the modern funeral? Why do we feel like the service isn't even complete until we've all sat down and seen the montage?
To answer that, the text argues we have to look at the slideshow not just as some new tech feature, but as a cultural artifact. That's the exact term the source uses.
A cultural artifact.
Yeah. It argues that while the technology involved, so the JPEGs, the MP4s, the lumens shooting out of the projector, while all of that is brand new, the human need that it serves is literally the oldest one we have.
The need to remember.
The need to tell the story of the tribe, to stand up and say, this person was here, and this is exactly who they were.
So here is our roadmap for this deep dive. We're going to go really deep on this. We're going to trace the entire history of memorialization, literally from the Stone Age up to the Screen Age.
It's quite a journey.
It is. We're going to unpack the psychology of why these visual narratives hit us so much harder than, say, a spoken eulogy might.
Oh.
We'll look at the design principles, the actual art and science of doing this right.
And we are definitely going to get into the very tricky territory of ethics.
Oh man, the ethics of curation. That is a massive part of the text.
It really is, because when you decide which photos make the cut for the screen and which ones stay hidden in a folder, you are essentially editing a human life.
We will talk about that curator's dilemma. And finally, we'll look at the logistics, the tech, and the broader sociological impact on our collective memory.
It's just an incredibly comprehensive look at how we construct legacy in the digital age.
So let's just dive right in. Section 1, From Stone to Screen, the Evolution of Remembrance. The source text lays this out as a continuum. It explicitly does not view the digital slideshow as an isolated invention.
Right. It's just the next logical step in a very long line of human behavior. It all starts with oral storytelling. If we go way back, before written language, memory was entirely performative.
It was an event.
Exactly. It was ephemeral. You gathered around the fire, and the elders told the story of the ancestor. He was a brave hunter, or she was a wise healer.
But the catch was the fragility of it.
Complete fragility. If you stopped telling the story, or if the designated storyteller passed away, that memory just evaporated into thin air. It was gone forever.
Which is terrifying when you think about legacy.
So humans, being clever and wanting to be remembered, invented physical markers. We realized we needed to outsource our memory to something that wouldn't die. So we started stacking stones.
Cairns and burial mounds.
Yeah. We carved runes into wood. And eventually, we moved to the classic gravestone and the bronze plaque.
Which totally solves the permanence problem, right?
Yeah.
A solid granite headstone is going to sit there and last for centuries. But The text points out a really major flaw in that medium,
The bandwidth problem.
the bandwidth. I love that the author frames it in tech terms.
It makes so much sense, though. Think about the data transfer rate of a tombstone. It is incredibly low.
You get a name.
You get a name. You get a date of birth and a date of death. And maybe, if you're lucky and had some money, you get a tiny epitaph, like beloved father or rest in peace.
It asserts existence. It
Exactly.
basically just says, hey, I was here.
Right, but it tells you absolutely nothing about the actual narrative of that life. It doesn't tell you that he had this really weird, loud laugh, or that he was obsessed with his garden, or that he was secretly terrified of spiders.
That's a completely binary record.
Yeah.
You either existed or you didn't exist.
Exactly. So for hundreds of years, we traded nuance for durability. Then we jump forward a bit to the era of print. And this is a phase where most of us probably have some personal familiarity.
The printed funeral program. The folded pamphlet.
Yes.
I mean, I have a drawer full of these at home. I think most people do. You go to a service, you get the program, and you stick it in a book or a keepsake box afterwards.
The source text calls this specific phase the print limitation. And it's really interesting to analyze why that pamphlet became what it was. Historically, it was a purely functional document.
It was an instruction manual.
That's exactly it. It was a guide for the service. Here's the order of events. Here's the hymn we are all going to sing on page 4. Here's the person doing the scripture reading.
And then usually, either on the cover or maybe on the back page, there was a little bio.
A very brief bio, and critically, usually just one single photo.
The official portrait.
Right. And we really have to remember why that was the norm. It wasn't some minimalist artistic choice by the family. It was a harsh economic constraint.
It was expensive.
Exactly. In the 1980s or 90s, mass printing photographs was costly. You needed high-quality, glossy paper. You needed distinct color ink processes. And physical space was severely limited on a standard piece of folded cardstock.
So families were essentially forced to choose one single image to represent maybe 80 or 90 years of life.
And that is a huge psychological pressure. Think about it. Which photo do you pick? Do you pick the glowing wedding photo from 1950? Or do you pick the professional formal portrait they had taken right before they retired?
Whatever you picked, you were freezing that person in time.
It was entirely static. If you pick the young photo, people sitting in the pews kind of forgot that they ever grew old and had grandchildren. If you pick the older photo, people forgot they were ever young and vibrant. It was a snapshot. It wasn't a movie.
And then the digital shift happens. The source identifies two very distinct explosions here that converge to create the modern funeral slideshow as we know it today.
First, you have the explosion of capture.
Cameras just suddenly being everywhere.
We went from a society where you bought a single roll of 24 exposure film for a specific birthday party to a society where every single person has a high-definition, limitless camera in their pocket 24/7.
We started documenting literally everything.
Not just the big hallmark moments anymore, but the mundane ones. We take pictures of our breakfast. We take pictures of the dog sleeping on the rug. We take selfies when we're having a messy hair day.
So the visual archive of an average human life just expanded exponentially almost overnight.
Families suddenly possessed vast visual records of their loved ones. We're talking thousands and thousands of images, instead of just a shoebox with 24 faded Polaroids.
And the second explosion the text mentions was the removal of the physical limitation.
Right, because digital projection has basically zero marginal cost. To project one photo on a screen costs the exact same amount of money as projecting 1,000 photos.
You aren't paying for the ink. You aren't paying for the cardstock paper.
So those old historical constraints just totally fell away. We moved from being forced into that single static printed portrait to being able to build a chronological timeline.
And that is the key shift the author focuses on. The move from one image to many images is what finally allows for real storytelling. We can actually show the progression.
We can show the arc of a life, from infancy all the way to old age.
Now, the text makes a very specific distinction here that I think is incredibly important for you, the listener, to understand as we move forward. It clearly differentiates between just a random montage and a true digital funeral slideshow.
Yes, and this is crucial. In casual conversation, we tend to use those terms interchangeably, but the source argues that a digital funeral slideshow is a very specific media genre.
A montage might just be a random shuffle of 100 images, like a computer screensaver.
Exactly. But a funeral slideshow is defined in the text as a time-based multimedia presentation.
It has a defined start, a middle, and an end.
It unfolds over time. It incorporates music intentionally to drive the emotional current of the room. But the absolute distinguishing feature, according to the text, is intentionality.
Intentionality.
Yes, it is considered a ritual object.
That is a really heavy term, a ritual object.
It is, but the author compares it directly to a eulogy. When you sit down to write a eulogy, you don't just read a random list of facts. You are carefully curating words to convey the true essence of a person. You are crafting a narrative arc.
The slideshow is just the visual equivalent of that.
Right. You aren't just dragging and dropping a raw folder of iPhone files onto a screen. You are selecting specific, meaningful images to honor their identity and their legacy. You are trying to make a statement that says, this is the truth of who this person was.
It is so fascinating to think of a digital MP4 file as a ritual object. Because usually when we hear that phrase, we think of physical things. We think of lighting candles or burning incense or laying down flowers.
But in the modern world, this digital file serves the exact same sociological function. It focuses the entire community's attention.
And that actually leads us directly into why it works so well. Section 2, the psychology of the slideshow.
Or, as we could call it, why does this video make me cry so much harder than the 30-minute speech the priest just gave?
It's such a universal common experience. You go to a funeral and you hold it together through all the readings. You hold it together through the prayers. But then the lights dim, that first piano chord hits, and you see a picture of the deceased laughing at some summer picnic from 20 years ago, and the dam just completely breaks. Why is that?
The source digs deeply into the science of visual memory and recall to explain this.
And it turns out our brains are literally just wired for this medium.
They really are. Visual memory triggers emotional recall significantly faster and much deeper than language ever could.
Because language requires active processing.
Exactly. If I am standing at a podium and I say to the room he was a very happy child who loved to eat ice cream, your brain actually has to do a lot of heavy lifting.
Right.
It has to decode the English syntax. It has to understand the abstract semantics of the word happy and the word ice cream. And then it has to construct a mental simulation of what that might have looked like. It is a highly cognitive, logical, step-by-step process.
Go to photo.
If I just show you a giant photo of him at age 5 with chocolate ice cream smeared all over his face, missing a front tooth, and absolutely beaming at the camera, that image bypasses your brain's logic center entirely.
It goes straight to the feelings.
It hits the amygdala directly. It hits the emotional core instantly. You don't have to decode or understand it. You just immediately feel it.
The text also talks about this whole phenomenon in the context of something called integration.
Yes, integration is a really important clinical term in grief counseling and psychology.
How does the text define it?
Well, when we lose someone, especially if it's a sudden or unexpected death, our reality basically fractures. We have this deeply ingrained memory of them as a living, breathing, interactive person, and then we have this jarring new reality of their absolute absence.
And those two things just don't fit together in our heads.
They don't. It feels incredibly fragmented. It causes immense cognitive dissonance.
And the slideshow actually helps bridge that gap.
It helps us see the continuity of memory by seeing the person seamlessly transition through different life stages on screen. The toddler, the high school graduate, the new parent, the aging grandparent, we see the entire thread.
We see the whole life as one continuous, completed story.
Right. It helps the grieving brain accept that the life was indeed lived, it was full, and now it has naturally completed its arc.
That leads directly to the concept of meaning-making, which the text highlights.
Meaning-making is essentially the core of narrative therapy, because raw grief often feels entirely senseless and chaotic.
It's just a void.
Yes. Meaning-making is the human act of imposing a structured story onto that chaos to make it bearable. The slideshow acts as a narrative framing device.
It shifts the entire focus of the room.
It shifts the focus away from the death itself, the trauma that literally just happened, and redirects it back to the life that was lived.
It reminds us that the actual moment of death was just one single moment, but the life was made up of millions of beautiful moments.
Exactly. It highlights the relationships they formed, the experiences they shared. It provides visual proof that the life mattered.
I really want to touch on the physical experience in the room, too, what the text calls the shared focal point.
This borrows a lot from the sociology of the cinema.
Think about a standard church service or a memorial hall before the video plays. People are kind of looking around. They are checking their watches. They are glancing over at the family in the front row. The room's attention is very diffuse.
There's a lot of ambient distraction. But the moment that video starts,
The room goes completely dark.
the hushed talking stops, The source notes that the slideshow literally suspends verbal communication. Everyone in that room creates a geometric triangle between themselves and the glowing screen.
We are all seeing the exact same image at the exact same millisecond.
And it creates this profound sense of communal grieving.
We're all vibrating on the exact same emotional frequency.
And this is a crucial point the text makes. It validates the emotion in the room.
What do they mean by validating the emotion?
Well, let's be honest. Funerals are inherently awkward social situations. Most people simply don't know how to behave. They're sitting there wondering, should I cry now? Is it okay if I smile? Am I showing enough respect?
It's a very tense environment.
But the slideshow gives the audience permission to feel. If a genuinely funny photo pops up on the screen, maybe a picture of the deceased wearing some ridiculous, elaborate Halloween costume, and a little ripple of laughter goes through the room.
It totally breaks the tension.
It does. It signals to everyone in the room, hey, it is actually okay to laugh. It is okay to remember the joy of this person and not just focus entirely on the loss.
It validates the sheer complexity of mourning. It creates this really safe container for all those conflicting feelings.
And just briefly, before we move on to the actual design elements, the source also mentions the experience of the people who are actually making the slideshow. It calls this creation as therapy.
Oh, I think we have all seen this happen.
Yeah.
There's always that one family member who stays up until 3 in the morning the night before the service, frantically scanning old photos on a flatbed scanner.
It seems incredibly exhausting from the outside, but the text argues that it is a deeply therapeutic process. It offers the bereaved a sense of agency.
Agency meaning a sense of control.
Yes, death completely strips us of our control.
Right.
We feel entirely helpless against it.
You can't stop it.
But the slideshow is something you can control. You can carefully choose the song. You can crop the photo to make it look just right. You can decide that the specific picture of the family vacation absolutely must come right after that picture of the high school graduation.
It gives the bereaved a tangible job, a mission to focus on during a chaotic time.
It is an active act of caretaking for the deceased, even after they are physically gone.
That is just a really beautiful way to frame it. But as we move into Section 3, we do have to admit a hard truth. Meaningful intent does not always equal good execution.
No, it certainly does not. Section 3, the art of design. Or basically how not to completely ruin a sacred moment with bad tech choices.
The host in me really has to jump in and say this. I have been to funerals where the slideshow was just an absolute disaster, and it is so tragic because it violently pulls you right out of that beautiful meaning-making zone we just talked about, and suddenly drops you into tech support mode.
The source is remarkably clear on this point. A poorly designed slideshow distracts the audience and frustrates them. It actively undermines the ritual itself.
So let's look at the specific principles the text outlines to avoid that. The first major one is pacing.
This seems to be, by far, the most common pitfall for amateurs.
It's the classic Goldilocks problem. It's either way too fast or painfully slow.
Let's talk about what happens when it's too fast.
We see this a lot with automated software, right? Where it tries to automatically sync the transitions to the fast beat of a song.
Yes, and you end up with what I call the strobe light effect. You have complex family photos flying by every half second
It honestly creates anxiety.
because your brain is desperately trying to do its job. It's trying to recognize the face. It's trying to place the historical context. Wait, is that the beach trip from 1998? Who is that standing next to him? And right before your brain can answer those questions, the image is gone.
It feels incredibly rushed. It almost feels like we are carelessly discarding the memories rather than honoring them.
But conversely, going too slow is just as bad. If you leave a completely static image up on the screen for 15 or 20 seconds,
The audience's mind just wanders.
it does. They process the emotion in the first 3 seconds, and then they start looking at the background details. They start thinking, oh, wow, look at that hideous orange wallpaper from the 70s. Or is that a Ford Pinto in the driveway?
You completely lose the emotional connection to the person. You just start analyzing the vintage artifacts in the room.
Exactly. So what is the rule the text suggests?
The source provides a pretty solid guideline, the several seconds per image rule.
Usually translating to about 4 to 6 seconds per slide.
That is just enough time to visually recognize the context, process the faces, and feel the emotion, but not quite enough time to get bored and start looking at the wallpaper. And, of course, the transition should breathe naturally with the tempo of the music.
Next up is visual quality. And this is a really big one nowadays in the age of massive 4K projection screens in churches and venues.
Resolution matters. If you take a tiny, compressed low-res thumbnail that you downloaded from Facebook in 2009, and you try to blow it up onto a 100-inch projection screen, it looks terrible.
It looks like a pixelated mosaic.
It looks cheap.
And cheap is absolutely not the aesthetic feeling you want at a funeral. Subconsciously, it feels like a lack of care or effort.
The source really emphasizes the importance of high-resolution scanning for old physical photos and very careful cropping.
Oh, the cropping, the phantom hand phenomenon.
The phantom hand, we have all seen it.
It's when someone tries to crop out an ex-husband from a family photo, but they forget that his disembodied hand is still resting clearly on her shoulder in the frame.
It is incredibly distracting. Everyone in the room is staring at the mysterious floating hand. It completely pulls focus from the deceased.
The text also advises keeping the aspect ratio consistent. You don't want to violently jump from a vertical, shaky cell phone video straight into a wide, horizontal landscape photo without putting some kind of soft background or frame behind it.
It creates a visual stutter that tires the eyes. Let's talk about text for a minute, because some well-meaning people treat these slides like they are pages in a biography book.
The absolute mantra here is less is more.
Because if you put a whole paragraph of text on the screen, something like, "This is Dad at the Grand Canyon in the summer of 1987. It was a very hot day and we lost the car keys," the audience instantly stops looking at Dad's face and they start reading the words.
You are forcing them to engage their linguistic brain again, which is exactly what we just established we want to bypass to hit the emotional core.
You completely break the visual spell.
Right. So the text advises using only very simple, brief identifiers if you absolutely must use text.
Just put 1987 or the Grand Canyon.
Keep the audience's primary focus on the raw visual experience.
And finally, for design, the soundtrack. The music is the unseen emotional engine driving the entire thing.
It absolutely sets the tone for the room. The music must align genuinely with the deceased's actual personality.
If they were a biker who loved heavy metal, you should probably play Metallica. If they were a classical aficionado, play Puccini.
But the source has a very specific, strongly worded warning here that I found fascinating. It calls for a strict lyrical review.
Please explain this for the listeners, because it's so important.
You have to actually sit down and listen to the lyrics of the song you choose. Not just the chorus that you remember, not just the general sad vibe of the melody.
Because some songs sound incredibly sad and moody, but are actually wildly inappropriate for a funeral.
Exactly. The classic example is Every Breath You Take by The Police. It sounds very moody, very intense, very emotional.
But it is quite literally a song about a dangerous stalker.
Right. Another example they use is Tears in Heaven by Eric Clapton. It is undeniably a beautiful, moving song, but is very specifically written about the tragic loss of a young child.
So if you're playing that song for a 95-year-old great-grandmother who died peacefully in her sleep, it creates this really weird, uncomfortable cognitive dissonance for anyone listening to the words.
Or people choose songs that are secretly about cheating or bitter breakups just because the acoustic guitar sounds sad.
You do not want the audience analyzing the lyrics and suddenly thinking, wait a minute, why are they playing a breakup song right now? You want the music to invisibly support the visuals, not actively fight against them.
Okay, so we have the technical design rules down, but now we are heading into much deeper water. Section 4, ethics, consent, and representation.
This is where the source material gets surprisingly philosophical.
This is what it calls the curator's dilemma. We are moving past the question of how to build the slideshow and confronting the much harder question of what should actually be in it.
Because the reality is, when you curate a slideshow, you are telling a definitive story. And every single story involves making choices.
It requires selection and, just as importantly, omission. You are actively constructing a history for public consumption. And the messy reality is, human lives are incredibly complex.
They are messy. Nobody is a perfect saint 100% of the time.
Exactly. The dilemma is, how do you present a fair, balanced portrayal that respects a person's complexity without needlessly exposing sensitive things that should probably remain private?
The source outlines this by talking about the wild years versus the saint.
Right. Let's paint a picture. Let's say the deceased had a really wild, highly rebellious phase in their 20s. Maybe they rode with a rough motorcycle gang, or they partied really hard. But for the last 40 years of their life, they were a very quiet, devout, upstanding community leader.
Do you show the photos of the wild years at the funeral?
If you completely omit them, are you essentially lying about who they really were and what they lived through?
But if you do put them in, do you risk deeply offending the church friends in the room who only ever knew the saint version of this person.
The source argues for the concept of balance. The goal is to capture the true spirit of the person. If that early rebellion was a core foundational part of their life journey, it probably belongs in the narrative somehow.
But maybe you just show a cool picture of them sitting on the motorcycle, and you don't need to include the photo of them passing out at a frat party.
Right. Nuance is key. Then there is the blended family issue, which the text notes is an absolute minefield for the curator.
Oh, divorce and remarriage.
Yes. Say you have a second wife sitting in the front row of the service mourning her husband, but his children from his first marriage are also sitting right there in the front row.
Do you include photos from the first wedding?
It's an agonizing choice. If you leave the first wife out entirely, the children feel like their actual history and origin is being aggressively erased.
But if you put those wedding photos in, does it cause unnecessary pain to the widow who is grieving in the room right now?
The source text doesn't pretend to give a hard, universal rule for this because every family is different, but it does suggest a guiding principle. Keep the focus strictly on the deceased.
The slideshow is fundamentally about their life.
And that first marriage, whether it ended well or not, was a significant chapter of their life. But integrating it requires immense sensitivity and tact from whoever is editing the video.
What about the issue of consent and privacy regarding the other people who happen to be in the photos?
Oh, the background actor problem. This is a very modern digital issue. Just because I happen to have a photo of you looking terrible at a barbecue on my private phone does not mean you are legally or morally consenting to have it projected on a 20-foot screen in front of 200 people.
Or even worse, put on the internet permanently.
And that is the real kicker here. Distribution. In the old days, a physical collage board on an easel at a funeral home was only seen by the 50 people standing in that specific room, and then it got packed away in a cardboard box forever.
But today, the digital slideshow is almost always live streamed to the web.
And it is frequently uploaded to a permanent public memorial website that anyone can search for.
So a purely private family moment suddenly becomes permanent public record.
Families really have to sit down and proactively decide on the scope of sharing. The source strongly advises doing a context check.
Asking yourself, is this specific image appropriate for the entire world to see on YouTube?
If the answer is no, maybe that photo stays out of the digital file that gets uploaded to the internet, even if you decide it's okay to show it privately in the physical room during the closed service.
It is a really vital distinction, navigating the rules of the room versus the rules of the world.
Exact.
Moving right along to Section 5, Integration, Technology, and Logistics. We have successfully navigated the ethics. We've designed a beautiful, well-paced slideshow. Now, how do we actually make it work in the physical, real world without it crashing?
The source uses a great term here. It talks about managing the memorial ecosystem.
I really like that term.
Huh?
Ecosystem implies that all these different pieces are interconnected. The slideshow doesn't just exist in a vacuum.
It has to smoothly integrate with all the other ritual elements. The printed program, the spoken eulogy, the flowers, the online tribute page. The source specifically mentions using QR codes as a modern bridge between these elements.
Right. It's becoming very common to put a custom QR code on the back page of the physical printed program.
And suddenly, that static piece of paper becomes a digital portal. You point your phone at it, and you are instantly watching the slideshow on YouTube or reading an extended biography or looking at a charity donation link.
It perfectly links the physical keepsake that you hold in your hand to the expansive digital narrative in the cloud.
The text actually mentions a specific resource organization here called the Funeral Program Site.
Yes, the Funeral Program Site is highlighted as an industry example of an organization that exists specifically to educate families on this exact intersection.
They help everyday people understand how to seamlessly make the traditional print elements and the new digital tech work together so you don't end up with a totally disjointed experience.
It's all about creating a cohesive, unified tribute ecosystem.
But we do need to talk about the absolute nightmare scenario, the tech fail.
The absolute bane of every single funeral director's existence.
We have all been sitting in a service when it happens. The audio is completely blown out and screeching. The video keeps buffering because the church Wi-Fi is terrible.
Or the projector bulb just flat out dies halfway through.
It is a tragedy when it happens because it aggressively breaks the emotional spell. You go from a state of deep, reflective mourning straight into, hey, can someone find the IT guy and an HDMI cable?
The source is incredibly emphatic about this point. Test.
the file.
You have to test them in the actual physical room.
You cannot just assume it will work because it played fine on your MacBook at home.
You have to check the ambient lighting. If the church has a massive stained glass window that lets in blinding noon sunlight right onto the projector screen, nobody's going to see a single photo.
You have to check the house sound system.
And please, do not rely on live Wi-Fi streaming for the presentation. Always, always have a hard copy exported on a USB thumb drive and a backup downloaded on a local laptop. Good advice.
Yeah.
Now, accessibility is another logistical point the source raises that I honestly hadn't really thought about before reading this.
It is a really beautiful sociological point. Visual storytelling is inherently profoundly inclusive.
Because it completely transcends language barriers.
Exactly. We live in a highly globalized, multicultural society. You might attend a funeral where the primary eulogy is delivered in English, but maybe half of the extended family sitting in the pews only speaks Spanish or Tagalog or Korean.
They might not catch every single subtle nuance of the spoken speech.
They might feel a bit alienated by the language barrier, but they instantly understand a photograph of a smile.
They understand the context of a family hug. They understand the joy in a photo of the deceased holding their newborn baby.
The visual medium allows absolutely everyone in that room, regardless of their native language proficiency or even their literacy level, to participate fully and equally in the emotional arc of the service.
And on a related note, the tech allows for remote access, which solves the modern geography problem.
The diaspora problem. Families today are spread out all over the globe.
Not everyone can afford to just drop everything and fly across the country on 3 days' notice for a funeral.
Live streaming the slideshow or hosting it online allows the cousin living in London to actively mourn at the exact same time as the immediate family sitting in New York. It creates this vital digital tether across time zones.
Which brings us to our final core topic, Section 6, the sociological impact. This is the big picture. Zooming way out, we are talking about collective memory and legacy.
The sociologist in me absolutely loves this part of the text. The source makes the bold argument that these slideshows are not just remembering history, they are actively constructing history.
In what sense? How are they constructing it?
Well, collective memory isn't just an objective database of everything that ever happened. Collective memory is the specific story that a group of people agrees to tell about what happened. When you act as the curator and you select those 50 or 100 specific photos out of a pile of 10,000, you are permanently defining the visual canon of that person's entire existence.
That is a massive amount of power.
Think about a grandchild who was only 2 years old when their grandfather passes away. They are not going to have any real, reliable, personal memories of him interacting with them.
No, they won't.
Their entire fundamental understanding of who Grandpa was as a human being is going to be largely defined by watching that digital slideshow 10 years later.
Those curated images become the literal symbols of that man's life for all the future generations.
So if you consciously choose to leave out the hard times or the struggles, then to that grandchild, the hard times basically never existed. You are writing the definitive history book for your family tree.
Which naturally brings us to the anxiety of long-term preservation.
Digital files versus physical decay. We used to only worry about physical things. We worried about paper photos fading in the sun or getting ruined by water damage in a flooded basement.
But now we have to worry about bit rot.
And format obsolescence. I mean, just try opening a document file saved in WordPerfect from 1995 on a modern iPad. It is not an easy task.
It's almost impossible without an emulator.
The source argues that while the digital format offers the theoretical potential for eternal, pristine preservation, it requires active, ongoing management.
The author uses the phrase digital heirlooms.
I love that concept. You have to actively treat that MP4 slideshow file with the exact same level of care and reverence that you treat your great-grandmother's physical wedding ring.
You don't just toss a diamond ring in a random junk drawer and forget about it.
No, you back the file up in multiple places. You actively migrate it to newer video formats as software technology inevitably changes. You secure it in a redundant cloud server.
It requires stewardship. It's not a set it and forget it thing.
The source also makes sure to note some of the inherent challenges or societal pushback to this whole digital memorial phenomenon.
The risk of overemphasis. Because we are obviously a highly screen-obsessed culture right now.
There is a very real danger that the production of the slideshow becomes the main event, and the solemn funeral service, accidentally turns into a flashy movie premiere rather than a spiritual ritual of transition.
It should support the liturgy. It absolutely shouldn't overshadow it.
Right. And there is also notable cultural or religious resistance in certain communities.
True.
Some more orthodox traditions feel very strongly that bringing glowing television screens into a sacred sanctuary is profane. They feel that focusing so heavily on the earthly visual memories distracts the congregation from focusing on the spiritual transition of the soul.
And families really have to carefully navigate those established religious rules with their clergy.
So we have covered the deep history, the cognitive psychology, the practical design, the murky ethics, and the broad sociology. It really is a lot more complex than just firing up PowerPoint.
It truly is. It's the new architecture of grief.
As we finally wrap this up, the source text ends with a brief look toward the future.
It touches a bit on the role of AI and interactive media.
Imagine an artificial intelligence program that has access to scan your entire lifetime cloud photo library, reads all your social media posts, and automatically curates and paces the perfect slideshow for your family after you die.
Or a slideshow presented on a massive interactive surface where mourners can physically walk up, touch a photo on the screen, and instantly see the geodata or read the journal entry associated with that exact day.
The rendering technology will definitely keep evolving, it always does, but the source text affirms one very comforting thing. The core human purpose behind all of this, the need to honor a life and assert that they mattered, that will remain entirely unchanged.
The tools we use change, but the human heart really doesn't.
So, to summarize our massive journey today, the digital slideshow is fundamentally a bridge.
It is a bridge between the deep past of oral memory and the cutting-edge present of digital technology. It is a highly effective psychological tool for meaning-making during trauma.
And it is simply our newest form of building legacy.
Before we sign off, I want to leave you, our listener, with a final, slightly provocative thought. Consider it a little mental homework assignment for the week.
Oh, I'm curious. Let's hear it.
I want you to sit back and seriously consider your own digital shoebox. If a funeral slideshow had to be made to summarize your life today, like literally right now, based solely on the chaotic camera roll currently sitting on your phone and your public social media footprint, what exact story would it tell the room?
Wow, that is actually a slightly terrifying question to think about.
Right. Would it be the story you actually want told about yourself? Would it show your deepest relationships, your real passions, your meaningful contributions to the world?
Or would it just be 500 blurry screenshots of internet memes, 3 pictures of a half-eaten sandwich, and a badly lit selfie where you look exhausted?
It really highlights the massive difference between just passively capturing data and actively capturing a life.
It definitely makes you want to go out and take some intentional, meaningful photos with the people you love, doesn't it?
It really does. It makes you realize you need to actively curate your legacy while you are still lucky enough to be living it.
Absolutely.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much for joining us and listening to this special deep dive on the Funeral Channel Network. We really hope you will never look at a funeral slideshow or your own phone's camera roll the exact same way ever again.
It's been a great conversation. Goodbye, everyone.
See you on the next deep dive.